Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. In this episode, filmmaker Paul Farren talks with acclaimed cinematographer Roy H. Wagner. Recognised by Kodak as one of the top 100 cinematographers in the world, Wagner has produced some of the most striking and unique photography on American film and TV screens in the last 40 years. This episode coincides with the release of Roy H. Wagner's A Cinematographer's Life Beyond the Shadows, which is a new biography by Irish film historian Wayne Farren. The book offers an in-depth look at Wagner's career, creative philosophy and enduring impact on the industry.
First of all, thank you so much for taking the time out to have a chat.
Sure.
I've been reading through the book. I take it you had a good time working with Wayne.
It was wonderful.
How did this collaboration begin?
It started, I don't know how it began, but the earliest I recall is my getting involved with him on Nightmare on Elm Street. I had done Nightmare on Elm Street, and he was doing a book on that series, and I participated in that, and I liked the relationship so well, and I loved the book that he wrote so much. I had been writing a book for 20 or 30 years, and had about 1,000 pages of pieces, but I didn't know how to put it together. And I finally gave in. I said, I need a partner, and I liked Wayne's voice, and so I decided that he was a valuable resource.
Of course, I know Wayne's book, Nightmare on Elm Street, and I can see why he would have ran to you, because that being one of his favorite films. I know from the book it's not one of your favorites of the films you've worked on. Is that true?
I don't dislike it. I mean, it's not my favorite work done.
Yeah.
I love horror films. That experience was checkered because I was constantly having to help the director get through it and to help production get through the director. And because everybody was in such a disparate relationship that nobody would really talk to each other. And I came into it after 3 days of chaos, where they ended up firing the other cinematographer. I was originally supposed to be the cinematographer, and for whatever reason, the director chose somebody else. And so I had to now help somebody that didn't choose me, and to be friends, and also to be friends with the production company that was very ambitious, and didn't have the money or the time to do what we were doing. But my experience had always been to try. I actually enjoy that process, because my favorite films are films where they didn't have enough money, they didn't have enough time, and they still look great. Like, for example, Out of the Past, any of the RKO films, they never had the budgets to make those films.
Yeah.
They always seemed to do very, very well. I mean, MGM films and Fox films, they always had the money, they always had the time. They were beautiful, but they always had the money and the time.
Some of the greatest noir films were born out of shoestrings and just poverty filmmaking.
Nicholas Musaraca, who was a cinematographer on many of them, I asked him once, I said, why are your films so dark? And he said, because we didn't have any sets. And so, I mean, it was probably a joke, but there were certain things that weren't a joke. I mean, I remember the staircase from Magnificent Ambersons was also used on Cat People. It was also used on virtually every movie they had, because it's such a big set.
Yeah.
And so you watch movies, RKO movies, you go, oh, that's the Magnificent Amberson set. Because they were always reusing things. Not that the other studios didn't, but they always had a production department that redefined them. So I always loved that. Of course, obviously, I always wanted to work on the big movies and the big things, but my greatest joy was working on things that didn't have that, and that I could create something that was out of nothing.
I know from reading the book that you have some amazing mentors, and one in particular was Harry Stradling. Am I pronouncing it right?
Stradling, Stradling.
How did that relationship begin?
It began in the oddest way. As a little boy, a little boy, I used to go to the movies, and my mother and dad were constantly trying to force me to turn around and watch the movie, because what I was more inclined to watch was the light from the back of the theater dancing across that open space, shadow and light was moving. I just thought that was fascinating. And I think my father finally gave up and went to the manager and talked to him and said, "Can we see where that light is coming from? Because my son's really wanting to see that." So at a certain point, we were able to go into the balcony and go to the projection booth door, open the door. There was this huge, loud noise. It was a cacophony of like machinery noise, and I looked up into the booth. It was on a little staircase that went up to the booth, and there were these big black, what I thought of as at the time as like dinosaurs, dragons, and they were coughing out this smoke. Well, of course, they were projectors. There were two of them, and one of them was coughing out the carbon arc dust.
Mhm.
We went into the booth. The projectionist was this crusty old guy, and he said, "So you like the movies?" I said, "Yeah, I love the movies." He said, "Well, this is how they're made." He took me to the projector. It was a projector on the far side. Opened up the door of the projector, and there was all this clackety noise. And he said, "Look in there." And I looked in the gate of the projector, and all I saw were still pictures. And they were moving quickly through the gate, but they were still pictures.
Mhm.
I was disappointed because I thought, well, this was supposed to be alive and the illusion of life. And it suddenly occurred to me that this is magic. This is this is better than life. It's magic. And what they're doing is they're taking all these still pictures and they're creating this illusion of life. And I didn't think of it intellectually like that as a little boy. I just thought of it as magic. And I've always loved magic. My son loves magic, and I think that as motion picture makers, that's what we are as illusionists. We make magic come to life. And he said, "Okay, so if you really love movies, get a notepad, and every time you see a movie, write down the name of the director of photography because that's the man who makes the magic." And so that's what I started doing. I started writing down the names of every director of photography of every movie that I was seeing. And at a certain point, what he said is, there'll come a point where you'll see certain people you love more than others, and you should really kind of watch their careers. And this is a guy that probably had a sixth grade education as a projectionist, but he knew
Mhm.
to tell me that. So weeks go into months, and I'm in a little town of 20,000 people in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's a farmland, and it's a place called Sikeston, Missouri. It's in the very southern eastern part of Missouri, and we go to the. I always loved going to the library. So one day at the library, I heard this man come in, dressed suit, nice businessman. He said, "I need a Los Angeles phone directory," to the librarian, and she said, "Well, there's not just one. There's many." Well, oddly enough, I don't know how the click happened, but the click occurred where I said to myself, I could find out, I could call these cinematographers.
What made you pick Harry Stradling over other cinematographers? What was the
Oh,
well, no, but I know, but what film did you see him on that you
I
remember?
don't really, it's probably something like Easter Parade or some big MGM movie.
Yeah.
It could have been any number of films. But the truth was that the ones that answered their phones became the ones that became gods to me.
Yeah.
Answer their phones were not. I mean, it's that simplistic. I mean, it doesn't sound very romantic,
It
but
was actually, yeah, I think it's amazing that you went and did that and
well,
that you were determined to find out about these men.
it wasn't to my father because in those days to make a cross country phone call was extremely expensive. I didn't know that, but when my father got the bill, he knew that, and he said, "What are all these calls to Los Angeles?" And my mother said, "Well, I don't know." Well, I knew, and I had to confess to it. And he said, "Okay, look, this is a very expensive enterprise. You can't call all the time. I'll allow you to call once a month if you behave yourself and if you do well." So that was like going to church, and so um, I got to talk to Harry and James Wong Howe and Leon Shamroy, and a number of different people.
But those two alone are two of the amazing. James Wong Howe was one of the first cinematographers I became aware of as a kid for some reason. I don't know why. I think it was through seeing Hood, believe it or not.
Yes, he was unique. He was the only Chinaman that was a cinematographer, right? So he had a unique place in cinematography. But the funny thing is that if any of these fellows had a name like Smith, I would have never found them in the phone directory. But the fact that they had unique names allowed me to find them, and for the most part, most of them were very kind. They were shocked because in that era, in the 50s, nobody really cared about the cinematographer. There was no cinema departments that were teaching cinema and teaching you any of these things. So I think they found it kind of cute and charming that some 7 or 8 year old fellow was interested in their work, because everybody was interested in the movie stars and the directors. I was not interested in them at all.
Yeah.
I was interested in the magicians. So this went on for, it had to be a year, maybe 2 years. I mean, every month calling a cinematographer, asking him the stupidest questions you could imagine, because you could.
And you remember any of those questions?
Oh, at that age, I would not confess to any of them, frankly. At that age, I couldn't have known anything about photography. I couldn't know anything about movies, but I think that they found it cute, charming that someone was calling them and talking to them and wanting to know about them. It's a vanity profession, and everybody loves when you love their work or love them. And so at one point, I was talking to Harry one day. I think it was probably about 9 years old. And Harry said, "Where do you live again?" I told him, "Sikeston, Missouri." And he said, "Where's that in relation to Paducah, Kentucky?" And I said, "I really don't know." He said, "Put your dad on the phone." I put my father on the phone. And Harry said, "How far away are you from Paducah, Kentucky? And could you bring your son to Paducah on these dates?" And my father said, "Sure, it's not that far, and we can come." And so the whole family got in the car, brought a picnic lunch. We went and had a picnic lunch, and then I drove. I was driven onto the set where they were making this movie. It was like a circus. I mean, I explaining all these trucks and lights and all this colorful stuff, because in Sikeston, Missouri, nothing was colorful. We were all farmers, and so it was. When a circus came to town, that was magic. And so this was my magic. It was my circus. It was a movie set. Everybody was dressed well. They were dressed in suits, ties, frankly, formally dressed. I went to the edge of the periphery of the group of people, and the fellow came up to me and said, "Are you Roy Wagner?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he said, "Well, follow me." Now, the odd thing is, the fellow that came up to me was the assistant director. His name was Charlie McGuire, who was the assistant director on the Waterfront. He was a big assistant director. He ended up becoming head of production at Paramount. But his son, we didn't know this when we were working together at the time, but his son was Dennis McGuire, and Dennis McGuire was the assistant director of Nightmare on Elm Street many years later. And Dennis and I became very friendly. Charlie and I became very friendly. But Charlie walked me through all this maze of people, and I was the outsider, and they were looking at me, like, who is this punk? And so I walk up, and there on this dolly is Harry Stradling, who I didn't even know who he was. I'd never seen a picture of him. And he was obviously the god, the king, because everybody was kowtowing to him. And Charlie introduced me to him. He said, "Harry, this is Mr. Wagner." And Harry said, "Mr. Wagner, it's nice meeting you. Why don't you sit up here?" And he put me on the dolly behind the Mitchell BNC. And he said, "Okay, fellas, we can now go to lunch, because Mr. Wagner's going to shoot this film." And he walked away from me. Obviously, it was a joke. They thought it was very cute. I was scared to death because I thought he meant it. And that was the end for me. I mean, we were going to be friends for life. I think that the reason I met so many cinematographers is because I asked such stupid questions, and I was so persistent. There were occasions where Harry might have gotten tired of me, and he said, "Why don't you go over and see this cinematographer, or go over and talk to this cinematographer?" So in doing so he could get a break, I got to meet everybody. And when I finally got to Hollywood, oh, incidentally, the movie, this is funny. The movie that set that I was on, the very first movie set I was ever on, was A Face in the Crowd. And the director was Kazan. And I could have cared less about any of that. And of course, at that time, that was not a big movie. It was just another movie. But now it's become this extraordinary film. But I all I remember is this the set, the lights, the structure, how everybody treated each other, and from that point forward, I I joined the circus. You know, as a little boy, they say if you ever go to the circus and you go behind the scenes, that you learn the secret handshake, shake, and join the circus. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. I mean, there was no turning back. There was no way I was ever going to be anything but in the movie business, which was completely chaotic and insane, because in the 50s there was no way to get in. And so I never gave up on my dream.
What point were you really understanding what it meant to be a director of photography was?
I still think I'm trying to figure that out, because you're an artist, you're a technician, you're a manager of people. I always say that my main job, what I get paid for, is to be a crisis manager, because you're dealing with egos, you're dealing with people that are in stressful situations and trying to find a way of creating the illusion of life where it doesn't exist. I always found it interesting when you look through the camera, you have this illusion of reality, an illusion of a world that does not exist except inside that frame. Outside that frame is total chaos. There's craft service, there's people running around, there's equipment and junk and all this stuff. But when you look through that frame, there's a world that does not exist anywhere else.
It's one of those beautiful things about filmmaking, isn't it? The frame and all that chaos that creates that one moment.
It's total magic. I mean, magicians can do it to some place, but we can create the illusion of life, and for 90 minutes, we can suggest to an audience that they're watching a reality, whether it's something that's a comedy, or something that's a fantasy, or something that's real life, a drama. And so all these things began to assimilate into me, and I began to realize how complicated and how different it was. And although the director was in charge, the cinematographer is sort of the impresario. And he's the one that moves the metal. He knows how to move the metal. He knows how to uh, put the things together, put the puzzle together, so you create this image. All the other disciplines, the makeup, the hair, the wardrobe, production design, all those things have to funnel through to that frame. And that frame is the impresario of that frame is the director of photography. The director hopes that you're giving them what they want.
But as you said, it's also very much an understanding of what collaboration means.
Which is what I love. I mean, I don't know that I'm very good at marriage, but I think I'm very good at this marriage. I understand. I understand those relationships. I understand that an actor leaves their home, leaves the conflict of their life, comes to the set and stands in front of a lens and has to create this illusion that doesn't exist anywhere else. One of the things I suggest is that what I loved about film over digital, although I did the very first digital photography, is that you're an actor standing behind a proscenium drape in a theater, and when that drape opens, you are now that person. You're now that character, and you have to sustain that character throughout that performance. And in film, every 9 minutes you have to change the film and put a new roll of film in. With digital, you can shoot forever, and you can constantly, and that's a different discipline. But I love the fact that in filmmaking we are one of the last vestiges of the industrial revolution. We manufacture everything by hand. Everything that goes into that frame has had to be put there physically. It's not something that's done with CG or something that's done as an animator or something that just happens. It has to be a disciplined thought that's brought to bear on that frame to create that illusion. And that's what I love.
How did you find the process from moving from film to digital? How did you find digital to begin with when you started using it?
I always feel I love photography. I love the technology. I love the mechanics, but I always see myself more as a storyteller. I mean, in truth, I love movies. That's what I love more than photography or cinema, is I love movies. If I can go into a movie theater and be enchanted um, with a story, that's far better to me than whether it's got great photography or not.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's some movies I love that don't have great photography, and you know, the truth for me is that's really what I fell in love with in the first place was the movies. And so I I am much more inclined to embrace that than anything else. I mean, I will compromise anything I'm doing to to tell a story better.
It's all about elements called coming together in this at the same time in that magical moment to create everything, as you say.
That's
The
right.
design, the performance, the writing.
Everything. I mean, look at us. Here we are, continents away from each other, thousands of miles away from each other. We're creating a reality that doesn't exist except right here. And, and I love that. And I mean, I've been told, oh, AI is going to destroy the movie business and all of this. And I kind of laugh about it because I remember reading that Florence Ziegfeld, uh, when he was producing the Ziegfeld Follies in the 30s, was talking to Ed Sullivan, who was a reporter in the lobby of his theater, and he said, "Ed, I hope this play is not successful." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because if it's successful, then I'm going to have to take it on the road. I'm going to have to take all the scenery. I'm going to have to take all the people. I'm going to have to take everything on the road. And every night we're going to have to rebuild this show and do it again." And he looked down on the ground and he said, "This is the future." And he was looking down at film reels. And so he said, "I only have to do it once. The film, I only have to do it once." So from my point of view, that's the original AI. If you look at film, there's nothing there that's real. It's an illusion. There is certainly an illusion of a person's face or a set or a place on that piece of plastic, but it's not real. Just like AI is not real. I mean, as frightened as that the theater actors and the theater crews and the theater directors and producers were of that transition to film, we're just as frightened of it now, just as frightened as we were with color or with sound. Every new transition creates this fear, and how you handle that fear is, suggests who you are as a storyteller. If, if storytelling becomes your most compelling thing, it doesn't matter about how you
Mhm.
do it.
It's almost like you could say a fear of aesthetic as much as it is anything else. And AI's introduced some new aesthetic that we're getting our heads around.
Right.
And how it affects everyone's jobs, though, I suppose, is another kind of more realistic thing that people fear as well.
But that happened back then too. And, I'm sure was painting shadows on the cave, thought, nobody's going to see this except somebody that comes into my cave. And, it's always been the sadness. I mean, we lose technologies or ways of expressing ourselves for new ways of expressing ourselves. Who would have thought that computers would step in front of writing by hand? And and the love of I love pens. I collect pens, but the truth of the matter is, I seldom use them because I'm always on a keyboard.
Mhm.
And so, it's just part of the journey. And you have to ask yourself, what is it really? Why am I here? What is important to me? Is it because of the technology, the stuff, or is it because I love to tell somebody else's story?
You mentioned crisis management as part of your job. Why does that appeal to you, do you think?
I don't know that it appeals to me.
Well,
I,
it works for you, though. It seems you like the challenge of it. It really helps with your creativity, as it were. With
I love people. I love people, and I love I love the three-dimensional chess. I love finding a way of of solving problems. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's what a director of photography was when I started. I just thought it was a guy in a suit that dressed up nice, looked standing by the camera and looked important. But as I progressed along and realized this was a part of it, I realized what my father was really good at was he. This is the curious part. Before I was born, my father was a baseball player, and before he married my mother, he had a blood test, and the doctor said, if you don't give up baseball, you'll die by the time you're 50. My father loved baseball, loved it, but he gave up playing baseball. Well, I knew none of this until my mother was in her 90s, and she told me this story. And I've always wondered why I was so obsessive about never giving up, never, always following your dream. And it was because my father didn't. And although he never talked about it, that breaks my heart that my father had to give up his dream because he loved my mother and wanted to pursue a family. Well, the tragedy is my father died when he was 50 anyway. So he gave up his dream, and I suspected, even though I didn't know any of these things, that I swore I'd never give up my dream. I'd never, and believe me, this business is not like it's an embracing, all-encompassing, loving business. It's a ruthless business, and the fact that we create magic in the midst of this chaos always surprises me. But the truth is that as a director of photography, you have to please the studio, you have to please the producer, you have to please the author, the writer, you have to please the director, you have to please uh, the uh, 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 the crew, you have to please yourself. You being the last one you have to please. And so it's a circuitous, fascinating route to find a way to get there. And I've read some extraordinary scripts that were terrible movies, and terrible scripts that are extraordinary movies. And I think that's a part of a group of people that get rid of their own will, their own ego, to find a way to join together as a community and create this suggestion of reality. And that is crisis management. It's a fact. An actor's having a bad day. You can't show that on screen. You have to find a way of helping them get there. Not only you, but everybody else, helping them get there. But for me, it's easier because I don't have, I don't have to say you have to be in front of this camera. You have to do this in 5 minutes. You have to go do makeup. When I get to the actor's in an extraordinarily vulnerable place. They're going right before they create that illusion in front of the camera. A director spend weeks, months. Diane Keaton, as a director, I spent over a month with her in pre-production. But when they walk onto the floor and they're standing next to you at the camera, there is that underpinning that says, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. I'm going to need help. And so they either, their ego tells them, I'm all important and you're going to do it my way or else. Or they say, what do you think about this? And so you become a part of that community that creates this illusion. So that's the crisis management. And of course, the studio wants you to do it. It costs no money and no time. And the producer wants it to be, and the writer wants it to feel exactly like it was on the page. So it's a lot of different people you're trying to please.
Inherently, there's no difference between a small, no budget set and a giant set when it comes to those sensibilities.
Oh no, there is a huge difference.
You think?
Oh yes, because when you're working, that's what I love about small films. When you're working on a small film, you only have to answer to the director and the community.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Big studio film, there's so many egos involved that are driving it, including, I mean, if you watch this new series on Apple TV, The Studio with
Seth.
yes, it's hilarious because that's the way it is. I mean, I don't want to say that's the way it is because I hate to say that that's the way it is, but that really is the way it is. From the top down, everybody's terrified that they're going to lose their job. And I worked with a producer, Michael Mann, a director, Michael Mann, who said, if you don't come and fire somebody at the beginning of every day, you're not doing your job. And he said the best is when they don't deserve it, because what you do is create this angst and this fear that he thinks makes his movies better. Well, I totally disagree with that.
But yeah, same.
But there are quite a few people that work that way, and it's but all this stuff is done out of fear, because it's like a cat spraying its territory. If people don't understand that I don't know what I'm doing, and I have the power to keep them away from me, I can sustain this power for a much longer time. And there's a great deal of that, not just in the motion picture industry, in politics, and in every community.
Well, it's one way of working, but I think the encouragement way is just as viable and works a lot better.
Much more fun.
Yeah.
I'm still having fun at 78, and it's because I've never carried that baggage. I refuse to carry it.
Of all the work you've done, you've worked in so many genres. You've worked in television. You worked in, as you said, in big studio films. You I think you cut your teeth in a horror film, and then you moved into ninja movies. Which funny, I was actually watching one or two of them there recently. When was that? You would think it was your favorite time as a DOP, or is that always ongoing?
It's always ongoing. It has a lot to do with relationships. I mean, the films I thought would be the best movies I ever made were terrible. I mean, I did Nick of Time, which was on the page a wonderful film. I think we failed. It didn't succeed as a movie, and I think it didn't succeed for a number of different reasons. Uh, Other things I've done that I thought would be incredibly successful weren't. When I did CSI, I thought, who's going to watch something called CSI? And when I did House, I wondered the same, not knowing the House was Sherlock Holmes, and
A lot of people were surprised by that.
was Elementary, which was more obviously Sherlock Holmes. My favorite Sherlock Holmes was Cracker. I loved doing the series Cracker.
Yes.
It was it was about a man who was lost, and was not the proper person to make decisions about right and wrong, but he was the person making the decisions, and that conflict was fascinating. And and the British version was Robbie Coltrane, and the English American version was Robert Pastorelli, and both of them were very conflicted people, and and that sort of added to their character. So Uh, you know, the best movie I've ever on was, uh, I don't know. I mean, Conrad Hall said my best movie was A Rumor of Angels. And although I loved the script, I loved working with Vanessa Redgrave and Ray Liotta. I think that the film fails in post production because the director, who's a dear friend of mine, um, became insecure and put music in so that the audience would know how to feel. And when you read the script, her character in the beginning, you think she's a witch, and here's this little boy going out to this area, and you're afraid for him, and you discover that what they have in common is they both have lost somebody in their life that's very important, and that bonds them together. And I thought that was a better story to tell than the story we ended up telling. But I'm very proud of the photography on it, although nobody will ever watch it. I think it's on YouTube now, and it just
Didn't know it was yours. Sort of a long time ago. I always remember Vanessa Redgrave's performance. That's a tough actress to deal with. I'd say she was hard work. A wonderful actress.
I loved her. She was tough on the director, uh, because she wanted to know why. She was like an old Vic actor. She was not like a Hollywood actor who just says, "Okay, where are my marks? Let me go." I mean, I remember one a director, the Peter Fallon, having to sit with her for 1 hour to explain to her why she was asleep in the bed in the scene. She didn't have to open her eyes. She didn't have to do anything. All she was in the background, asleep. But 1 hour, and she had to know that. And it, she was not malicious. She was not mean.
Sometimes actors don't ask enough of those questions when they should, because they are storytellers themselves.
But I love that. And my favorite actors have been those that have been that way. Billy Peterson on CSI, Hugh Laurie on House. I mean, uh, Pastorelli on Cracker, and Robbie Coltrane on Cracker. All of them were conflicted people, and they needed to know why they were stepping outside their comfort zone to do what they had to do. I mean, for me, being an actor is a tough thing because you're not you when you're there. So there's not you're out in the ozone, not knowing where you can stand, how you can act, what you feel. You have to create this illusion inside your soul, and the written page helps, the director's guidance helps, but with Vanessa, she was very tough and and very sweet and very kind. I mean, she was such a tender person that you could forgive her wanting to know why because it only helped the movie.
Yeah.
I remember, I fell in love with her when she did Camelot. I mean, she was beautiful. And when I first met her, I told her that, and she said, "Roy, I don't want to look pretty. I want to look like an old woman. Don't do anything to me that makes me look pretty," which for me is awkward because my mentor was a guy that knew how to make people look beautiful. And but it was a wonderful lesson in helping to support the character's story.
Conrad Hall, who was someone you regard very highly, and is an amazing DOP himself, and a very honest man. You were worried about his honesty when he came to a screening.
Got scared. Oh my God, what did I do? Because he's too honest. He'll tell me the truth. But you talk about Ray Liotta. He was, I've worked with a lot of, Hugh Laurie was English, and you wouldn't know it by with this moment he walked on the stage. He had an American accent. As soon as he walked off the stage, he had an English accent. I don't think it's you can define it by country.
Yeah.
Really sort of a personal choice of how people process things. I say Vanessa was old Vic because that's the only way I can figure it out. But Ray was very sweet, very very good man, very easy to work with. It's funny, some of the hard ones are people that you think are the nice ones, but he was very thorough. He was constantly reading the script, constantly off to himself, processing everything. Vanessa required a great deal more attention. And I mean, there's a certain dignity in the way Vanessa looks in the film, but I think it has a lot more to do with how she carries herself in relation to how I photographed her. I just created her character as she would appear at that time in that place.
One of the quotes in the book was you nearly got lost in the joy of working on second unit, but you look at it, you said it because they were where all the nice people seemed to be working.
When I started out, it was the truth. I loved working with stunt people, and we did huge stunt films. I mean, Billy Fraker was a dear friend of mine, and he had done Bullet, and he said, "Why don't you come? I'm going to San Francisco to do a movie, and we're going to have a chase scene like Bullet in this film." It was Burglar with Whoopi Goldberg. Not a very good movie, but a great chase scene. And so I went, and I had the best time. The director was Paul Newman's stuntman. He was his director, and we had all the top stunt people in the world doing that. And there was such a sense of camaraderie and community that it was wonderful. And the same happened on the movie with Charlie Sheen, No Man's Land. And I did a few of those, and I enjoyed every one of them. And if I hadn't loved lighting, if I hadn't loved, creating stories with motion pictures, I would have stayed in second unit. It was just the most fun.
Well, what's your thoughts on editing and how you work for the post-production process as a DOP?
I have I can edit. I've got a great deal of knowledge of editing, as does any author. You as a writer or as an editor, and I see cinematography as a visual grammar. I mean, parenthetical phrases, commas, sentence ends are the same as a hard cut or dissolve, or how you place somebody in the frame. Their back is turned to you, or they're facing you, or they're in the light, and not the light of the camera's moving or not moving. All those are grammatical choices that help tell you something about that character. And so I I know a great deal about editing. I have great relationships with editors, and I certainly don't try to tell them how to do their job, and they don't tell me how to do mine because we're both following the author
Yeah.
who's, and we can have the best idea for cuts or moves or lighting or whatever, but if the author doesn't like it, we have to defer to the author. And I find that a lot of people that say they want to be cinematographers really, really, really want to be directors. And I have directed before, and I love directing because I love that relationship with the actors. But I love more the idea of moving all this disparate things to put them, assemble them together to create this world that doesn't exist anywhere else. I think I love that more.
You worked on Beauty and the Beast back in the days before, um, there was a certain flourish coming into television that you were probably one of the first to bring to that kind of project, because it was quite an ambitious and very unusual project.
We were told, I was told, first it was my first television, which I did not want to do. But a friend of mine said, yes, do it. Alfred Hitchcock's cameraman told me to do it. He said, you get to practice every day, and everything you give them is going to be better than what they expect. And what I discovered was uh, the head of CBS one night, he was on the set, and he said, Roy, I'd known him when we were both PAs at MGM. And he said, Roy, your work is beautiful. It's just beautiful. And I said, oh, thank you. And he said, yeah, but why? I went, what do you mean, why? And he said, you know, all you're doing is the filler between the commercials. And he meant it. So if the things look good, you did it for yourself, not for them. They didn't care. After I did Beauty and the Beast and Quantum Leap and a few things, there came this philosophy of channel surfers. That if a person was channel surfing, what would stop them on your channel? And it was if the images were great or it was an actor they liked or something like that. So I began to get hired because my images were unusual and beautiful. And so, things even like Party of Five, which I think was a horrible show, um, on a show like that, they could look at the lighting and go, oh, wow, that looks nice. And maybe stop and take a look at it. But for the network, they began to say, well, this is what we really like. Because if we can cause someone to literally channel surf and then stop on our show, well, you're worth the money. And so that's how I started getting hired.
It's kind of amazing, such a superficial attitude, working with your with attitude of creating substance. That's something we're talking about.
You don't do it for them, you do it yourself. I mean, you service the people that brought you to the project. But if you create something that's artistic, you really are doing it for yourself.
Mm,
Because the truth is, they would you watch a lot of television, they just they just believe to settle in. Especially if it's a show that's been on for a long period of time. Yeah,
yeah.
okay, get us through it. I mean, every year of a series, the next year they want to save money, want it to be cheaper, and instead of being more expensive, they make it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And I just didn't fit with me. I didn't like that at all.
You also worked with Joel Schumacher on a project that only lasted 6 episodes, and that the politics again kind of you felt killed it. But I'm interested in that from the point of view of Joel being a very always doing projects that have a very strong visual flourish, and you guys got on so well. It seems to be one of your favorite directors to have worked with.
Joel, uh, he was a queen. He was fantastic. He I always said about Joel, he didn't necessarily know what he wanted, but he knew how to have a great party and bring the right people to the party. And the truth was that Joel, that's sort of marginalizing Joel, which you couldn't do because he really had a good eye. We went into a set that was beautifully set decorated. I just loved the way it was decorated. And Joel came in and said, "I don't like that at all." So we went with the set decorator. They took everything out, and by the time we shot it, we had virtually nothing in there. Well, for me, it was harder because I had nothing to light except, you know, the space. But Joel was absolutely right. And the reason that the show was not successful, it was hugely successful, but it was the only show I ever did for Aaron Spelling, who I didn't like. Um, he was a phony. I think he, my wife's best friend is Jacqueline Smith, and she loved him, and my wife loves Aaron, but I didn't like him. I didn't. He was not a movie maker. He was a guy. He had a firm that did commodities. They became arable. But Joel had a show on that just come on. I think it was something 90210 or something like that. Television. And our show was more successful on another network, on CBS, I think it was, than his show. And he hated that. So he canceled the successful show, 2000 Malibu Road, so it wouldn't compete with his show because they were against each other. How we ended, I convinced Joel, this doesn't happen. You always have a different director on each episode. And I convinced Joel to do every episode. And I selfishly did that because I loved it.
Quite unusual for a director to do so many episodes.
I loved it because he was in complete control. He knew what he wanted. He never got in the way. The only thing that Joel did not like is he did not like shooting at night. And so what I had to figure out was a way of creating night in the daytime. And it was okay. I knew how to do that. But
Would you rather be out at night?
I love night. I'm a creature of the dark. But I understood why I didn't like it, and we did that. It was easy. We had great. It was a great cast. We had Drew Barrymore. We had a wonderful cast, and all of them. Everybody said, "Oh, it's all these women. They're not going to be able. They're going to be impossible to deal with." And Joel knew how to deal with every one of them. There was never a conflict ever with any of them. It was just magical. I wish that had gone on forever.
Yeah, it's a shame. John Badham is another director that you worked with 3 times or 2 times. Nick of Time and Another Stakeout. A Hard Way.
The Hard Way I did a second unit on. The first unit we did together was Another Stakeout, and then we did Nick of Time and Drop Zone. Then I worked with him a lot after that on television shows, and he would come in for an episode with Patrick Swayze on his show. But John was fantastic. John was a very sweet, friendly guy, but he is totally intolerant of people that don't do their job. And so for me, Harry Stradling was very good because he always taught me a director of photography doesn't get a turn. Because when the camera cuts, makeup and hair, and everybody comes in on the set, they do all that stuff, and they think that they actually have a turn. But he said, you don't have a turn. If you think that you have a turn, you're not going to work very much. What you have to do is function in a way where you don't need a turn, or you don't steal time, because when you're working, that set belongs to the director and the actors. Anything you do is never on the screen. And you're stealing time from the actor and the director. So I learned early on, which was a great thing for me because every studio and every director wanted to work with me because I was so fast, and my stuff looked good. So Badham was that was his discipline. He hated waiting for lighting. He hated waiting for anything.
Mhm.
And for me, my first feature with him, I was scared to death because here was this big time director, and I didn't want to disappoint him. So uh, he was tough for me, but he wasn't tough on me, and we became very, very good friends. And by the time that we'd finished Another Stakeout, we were friends, and he knew that I was not going to hurt him or try to steal from him, because there is a pomposity. Every artist has a pomposity about them, but I think you can see in me that I really don't have that. I'm really a genuinely wanting to give person, and Badham saw that. I think a lot of people have seen that in me, and it makes it easier because you don't have to get through all the bullshit.
Well, what were the lessons learned from the likes of Conrad and Bill Fraker and James Wong Ho?
They were all different. And Jimmy was um, about simplicity, about using as little as possible,
He's
to
famous for one light source, isn't it? One of the things he's famous for.
always do that, but he was very famous for that. But Jimmy was more of a filmmaker than he was a cinematographer. I kind of think I'm the same way. I mean, Jimmy was he would compromise whatever it took to tell a story. I mean, HUD is a film. It's not pretty. It's not beautifully photographed, but it services the story. And that was Jimmy, and he was really much more inclined to collaborate with the director, not just on the images, but on the performances and on the anything that had to do with whatever went into that frame. In some cases, because he was Chinese and they were afraid of him, they would try to keep him away, and that's too bad because Jimmy didn't have a mean bone in his body. Conrad uh, Conrad looked at everything like it was delicious, like it was souffle. I mean, he would take forever to find the right light in the right place, and and uh, and he would come up with the most ingenious things. I mean, in Jennifer 8, the idea that you're telling this movie through a blind person's point of view. I mean, obviously it's not all dark,
Mhm.
but it's very limited as to what you see. And how can you imagine pitching that to someone? I'm going to tell this from a blind person's point of view. But Jennifer Eight's a brilliant film, and it really one of the reasons it's brilliant is because you really kind of seen it through this limited portal that
Yeah.
was Conrad. That was him. I mean, he was as Billy Fraker, who was his best friend, had worked with him as an operator, said Conrad was above all of us because he saw everything as a delicious souffle. And it's the truth. I mean, it really was him. And when you talk to him about photography, and I talked to him about a week before he died, he was still seeing things as just as if they were fun and fantasy and joyful. And so, yeah, I don't know that Fat City has a certain gritty, dark look, and American Beauty has a fully different look. I mean, every one of Conrad's films have different looks, and so you couldn't say that he was an iconoclast that had only one. You can't look at a movie and go, "Oh, that's Conrad Hall's film," because he was so different. I mean, Road to
But
Perdition.
also the personality of the directors are in there to some degree, especially Fat City.
Ah, and Conrad again was like Jimmy Wong Howe in that he was much more a co-director. He tended to work with directors that had not directed before, like in American Beauty.
Sam
Director
Mendes.
Sam had not directed before. When he did Road to Perdition, Sam Mendes stayed away. He knew enough to let Conrad do everything, and so that was Conrad. Billy Fraker was uh, just an old Hollywood cameraman. He was a guy that loved Hollywood. Um, he loved people. He loved to make movies. His early work was his best work. Um, he had a lot of baggage, of personal baggage that caused him to compromise later on in his career. But you can see things like Bullet and Rosemary's Baby and pictures like that, and you say, this is a master filmmaker. And Billy was a, how would you say what Billy was? He was a studio cameraman. I would say he was like a Hollywood studio cameraman, like Shamroy or Arthur Miller or some of those guys. He could do anything and do it incredibly well and do it within time. He was a guy that you would, if you were under the contract system in old Hollywood, you'd be one of the guys you would hire because you would know he could do the job.
The book is fantastic and it's full of fantastic, it's great storytelling itself. It's full of wisdom and it's full of things for whether you're budding DOP or someone just looking to read about the joy of making films. I think it's an absolutely beautiful book and I hope it does really, really well.
I didn't want to celebrate Roy Wagner. What I wanted to say is if Roy Wagner can make it, so can you. So that was more of what I wanted. I mean, I didn't want anything technical. I just wanted to say this guy's had a 50-year career. And what's so special about him? Well, I can do it too. And that was more of what I really wanted the book to be.
And thank you so much for listening. So please make sure to like and subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts.